Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Marian Minor Cook Athenaeum. We're so happy to have you all here and so happy to be welcoming an alumna from this school, Naomi Bagdonas. So please give a warm welcome. We're really excited to have the CMC representation. So before I begin, just want to mention 3 things. Number 1, please make sure that your mask is over your nose and your mouth throughout the entire presentation. If you would like to take a drink of water, we kindly ask that you step outside of the Eggert Dining Hall. The second thing, we will have a Q&A portion at the end. So that means that while you're watching the presentation and during the presentation, continue to think of questions or feel free to write them down in a little notepad because you will have an opportunity to ask them after the presentation ends. And lastly, please take this time to silence and put away your cell phones. Yes, I see that wonderful action happening right now, but for everyone, I should see that action happening. As always, video and audio recording is strictly prohibited by the audience. So tonight, I'm really honored to introduce Naomi Bagdonas, who is an alumna from CMC. At her time here at CMC, she majored in economics and psychology and was also a Robert Day Scholar. She is currently, yes, applause for that. We have some RDS representation here as well. She is the co-author of the national bestseller book, Humor Seriously. Her scholarship is innovative, data-based, and daring, and it reveals to us that humor is beneficial not only for the individual, but for organizations. For the individual, we understand that humor decreases stress. It can help us to cope with tragedy. Over this past pandemic, I'm sure you all were watching John Mulaney. And as an organization or in teams, it can build trust. And so we should be, according to this new scholarship that we're seeing, less afraid of embracing levity and wit in every day. Humor is not something inaccessible, but that we can all engage in. And for this, we're really honored to have our guest tonight. Naomi has actually, she is currently teaching courses at Stanford's Graduate School of Business about the power of humor and facilitates interactive sessions for board and leadership teams of Fortune 100 companies and nonprofits, as well as to help leaders create cultures of levity and creativity. She advises executives and celebrities for events ranging from SNL and the Today Show appearances to political campaign speeches. Her work has been prominently featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, and many more that I'd be out of time if I listed here. So please give a warm welcome to our wonderful guest tonight, Naomi Bagdonas.
Thank you. Oh, wow. I am so grateful to be here. I have to say it's been a little bit overwhelming being back and talking to people because there are so many people just in the room here that I love. Professor Irick, who came to all the basketball games and still calls me Bags, and which was my name on the basketball team, and said to me once, Bags, what other sports aren't you good at, right? Did I get that right? Which I put up on my dorm, what other sports aren't you good at? DT, where's DT? Who, do you all know that DT is the most athletic person who has ever walked into any room on this campus? So when I was a student, DT was not only coaching the volleyball team, but also was coaching the basketball team and also was schooling us on the basketball court. So that was really wonderful. And anyways, there are too many other people to name. But one thing that happened at the dinner just now is we were going around and saying, we were talking about what brings people joy at CMC, and I was aggressively going around and asking you all that question. And what kept coming up, of course, is the people. And I remember leaving CMC and telling my mom, I'm so scared to leave. I don't want to leave. And she said, well, what are your fears? Let's dig into it and let's sort of talk about what you're worried about. And I said, I don't think I will ever find a community where I'm more seen and known and accepted than I do at CMC. And the vision that I have is walking around campus and seeing so many just having like a slideshow of smiling faces pass by that I say hello to. And then if you say, hey, how are you doing? It's okay to say, I'm actually not doing so well, and talk about it. So this is just such a beautiful and joyful place. And I am so grateful to be here, so thank you for having me back. One illustration, by the way, of just how special it is. Professor Aviv remembered that I sat in the front row of his class. He remembered that I sat next to Ramon Torres and that I passed notes during class and joked all during statistics. How special is this place? All right, so I want to start actually by asking you a question. It's going to be super fast, and we're going to come back to this question later. And that question is, did you smile or laugh a lot yesterday? Did you smile or laugh a lot yesterday? So take 30 seconds, turn to the person next to you or get in groups of 3 and just share, did you or did you not? And if so, what did you smile or laugh about? All right, 30 seconds is winding down. 5 more seconds to finish that thought. Great, perfect. If you heard something that someone else smiled or laughed about yesterday that is appropriate to share, raise your hand. Everyone's like, there was a lot of inappropriate laughing. Anything? Yeah.
My friend here was studying in a Bauer classroom and then took a break and decided to scooter around as fast as they could, and they said that was really fun.
Awesome. Scooting around as a break from Bauer. Great. What else? Yes.
I was at Costco getting gas, and the lady ahead of me, and I jumped in and got drunk, so nobody.
Okay, deal.
To lock her keys.
Okay, great.
So the whole line stopped, and I came to the conclusion I could do 2 things. I could get really angry, or I could kind of laugh about it. Because in my lifetime, I've done some stupid things too.
Yep. Well,
So I laughed.
comedy is tragedy plus time. You just have a short window to turn things into comedy. That's great. Okay, anyone else? Okay, I heard a lot of talking. So raise your hand if you smiled or laughed a lot yesterday. Okay, cool. Most people in the room. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. So I teach a class at the business school at Stanford, and the thesis of this class is that our lives and the world would be a whole lot better if we all navigated our life on the precipice of a smile. Not if we became comedians, not if we told jokes, but if we made this really small mindset shift to change the way that we interact with the world and in turn to change how it interacts back. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I should mention, by the way, that the class I teach at Stanford gets the same academic credit as financial accounting. So thank you, so you know it's good. I will say our class is not as good as Professor Masood's, so it's not that good of accounting. Okay, so I want to talk really quickly about how I got into this work and what my journey was from CMC, because it might not be what you would expect. So I was an econ and psych major at CMC. Woo woo. Great. And great, perfect. And I went to work. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in my career. So I was interested in lots of things. So of course I went into consulting. Great, thank you. Perfect. And the call and response is on cue. All right, so I went into consulting, and while I was at CMC, I was joyful all the time. I was laughing. I was doing the student theater group. I performed right here, this dinner theater where I played a cook, and I cried laughing on stage, and all my friends were there. It was amazing. And then I went to work at a large consulting firm. And about 3 years in, I had a moment that changed the trajectory of my career and of my life. And it was such a small moment. It was insignificant, like anyone from the outside would have looked at it and it would have been a blip. And this moment was an interaction with a client named Bonnie. So Bonnie was a client I had worked with for a number of months, and we had probably spent 100 hours together, working really closely. I was helping run this implementation, blah, 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 you get it, okay. So it was a Friday afternoon, and we were chatting, and she said, we were about to get off the phone, and she said, Naomi, by the way, I bet I know exactly what you're doing tonight, which is a weird thing for a client to say to you, but we had grown close, and it was fine, so I humored her, and I said, great, Bonnie, what do you think I'm doing tonight? And she said, well, I bet you're going home to your spotless apartment, and you are eating the same meal you eat every Friday night, watching History Channel documentaries and re-ironing your blouses for next week. And she was serious. Like, this was not comedy, this was my life. And I dug in. I was like, great, tell me more about this life, Bonnie. And she said, well, I bet you have, a wall of landscape black and white paintings and, probably a cat. And I said, great, what's the cat's name? She said, Cat? The cat was named Cat? And again, this was not ironic. And it was this moment of realization where it felt like someone had held up a mirror to me at work, and I didn't recognize who was staring back at me. I was leading a double life where I'm not a steamy, cool, fun, sexy one with race cars. It was a really sad double life where by day, I was thriving in my career. I was on track for the fastest promotion rate that was available at my firm. I was getting the highest ratings I could. By all external standards, I was crushing it. And then by nights and weekends, I was doing improv comedy. No one from either of these worlds knew what I was doing because I figured that neither one screamed transferable skills to the other. And I had this realization of that I was gonna burn out. I wasn't making good friends at work. I didn't feel known. I didn't feel seen. That exact thing that I had told my mom about, what I loved so much about CMC, my fear had completely come to reality. I didn't feel known. I didn't feel seen. I was thriving by external standards, but it wasn't enough for me. So I made this my life's work for the last decade. I said, I want to believe that we can have joy at work, that we can be authentic at work and bring our full selves to work, and also be successful. And so that's what I've done over the last 10 years. I partnered with a behavioral scientist at Stanford. I moved to LA to dive really headfirst into the study of comedy and improv. We partnered with comedians. We interviewed leaders across the country and across the world. We gathered a whole bunch of data. And the conclusion is two things. Number one, a sense of humor in life is a teachable skill. And two, that humor just might be one of our most underappreciated, undervalued assets as a leader. And so over that time, we've also partnered with behavioral scientists and researchers from the business schools of Harvard and Wharton and University of Chicago Booth, people who work at the Second City and Improv Olympic and SNL to build up this body of work. So today, what I would like to do is convince you that it is time to take humor seriously. All right, so here is going to be our very quick path. Number one, power of humor. I am going to, again, convince you using the sexiest means known to academics, behavioral science. All right, next we're going to talk about finding your funny. So finding your humor. How do you mine your life for material? Flexing your humor. How, as a leader, do we incorporate humor into our leadership style? And then fueling your humor. So what are some small daily hacks that we can be doing to have more of this in our lives? So first, let's talk about the power of humor. So there is a wealth of behavioral research here that I would be too bashful to say in front of Professor Raviv because it would show all of the holes in our research. But there is a wealth of research here around especially humor's power to boost our status and influence, to diffuse tension, especially when stakes are high, to boost bonds and improve trust between individuals and spark creativity. Now, we do not have all day, so what I've done is pull together a highlight reel. This is the best of the best, the greatest hits from the behavioral science around humor. So let's dive right in. Increase influence, tension, bonds, and creativity. All right, so I want you to imagine, let's talk about humor and influence. So I want you to imagine that you are negotiating over the purchase price of a piece of art. Something that you really want. So let's say, I know what you're thinking. Ooh. My partner said not to do that joke. He's like, don't. It's going to bomb. It's going to be so awkward. You're going to be up there. You're going to have to stand up there for like 40 more minutes. But I did it. Okay, so let's say that we're negotiating over this beautiful piece of art, okay? So you walk into the room and you're the buyer. You go through this simulation, you're talking about what prices you're willing to give, and for everyone on this side of the room, let's imagine that the seller gives you an offer that is significantly above your last bid, saying my final offer is X, okay? Now for this side of the room, exact same negotiation, exact same script, But the seller concludes with, my final offer is X, and I'll throw in my pet frog. Do you think the prices would differ? What you are willing to pay would differ between these two sides of the room? What do we think? A little bit, maybe? I see a nod here. How much? How much higher? What percent? 50%? You are crazy. You're crazy. I should go home now. I can't do this. 18%. That's still really good, right? 18% higher, just from a lighthearted line. An 18% higher price. And what's profound here relates to, by the way, on this, before we move on from influence, part of the reason for this is when we are able to use humor in a professional context, it changes others' perceptions of us. So this is research out of Harvard and Wharton that shows if you are able to use humor, as long as it's appropriate in a professional context, it will boost others' perceptions of your status, confidence, and competence. And it also improves persuasiveness in negotiations. Part of this has to do with diffusion of tension. So what's wild here is not only did you on this side of the room pay 18% more, but you also walked out of the room saying that you enjoyed the task more and that you felt less stressed with the negotiation. So you felt better about the negotiation even though you had paid a higher joke. And I really want you to let it sink in how bad that joke is. I'll throw in my pet frog. Okay, so the bar after you leave CMC is so low. It gets so low out there. It's low. Okay, next let's talk about how humor builds bonds. And I'm gonna need your help on this one. So I'm gonna show you a quick video, and then I'm gonna ask you to do a very brief exercise so that you can help me illustrate this one. All right, this video is quite academic, so try and lock in. As significantly more intimate. Now, why does this happen? Part of it is when we laugh, our brains release a cocktail of hormones. So this is our biology. This is our neurochemistry. We release, and one of them is called the trust hormone. So who knows, who can shout out what the trust hormone is? You got this. Yeah, I heard it. Almost. I almost heard it. Okay. Oxycontin, great. Yes, oxytocin. Our brains, we are just crazy when we laugh, yeah. All right, so we release oxytocin, which is often called the trust hormone. It is, and it's something that's released during sex, during childbirth, during breastfeeding, and it essentially cues our brains to create an emotional bond with the person, to feel safe and feel trusting. So if we think about the impact of this when we're laughing with strangers, when we're laughing with our colleagues, or even just with each other in our dorms, actually laughter really opens us up in a powerful way. All right. And by the way, one of the ways to release oxytocin in the business world that is still permitted by HR. So a double bonus for when we all go back to work, go to work. Okay, lastly, in our behavioral research boondoggle, let's talk about the candle challenge. Okay, so I bring you into a room, I show you these things on the table, a box of tacks, some matches, and a candle. Yes, that's a candle. Are you familiar with the creativity challenge in other courses here at CMC? Raise your hand if you know this one. Great, okay. All right, so I bring you into a room, and once again, we have half of you watch a neutral film clip, neutral, half of you watch a humorous film clip, and then we say you have 10 minutes to solve this challenge. Your goal is to attach the candle to the wall and light it in such a way that the wax does not drip onto the table. Okay, so think about what would you do? How would you get that candle onto the wall so that the wax doesn't drip onto the table? And we have a lot of creative ways to do this. Some people try and burn the side of the candle and stick it to the side of the wall. Yeah, this seems like a good idea. It doesn't work, but yes, great idea. A lot of people do that. And so there are a lot of different ways to do this. The solution is that you pour the tacks out of the box, you use a tack to tack the box to the wall, you put the candle in it, and you light it. Now, in order for you to solve this challenge, your brain has to overcome what's called functional fixedness. That is, you essentially see the box as a receptacle for the tacks and nothing else, rather than thinking creatively about the box as something that could say, hold the candle. Now, what was remarkable about this experiment is in the neutral film condition, 20% of the folks were able to complete this exercise within 10 minutes. In the other condition, 75% of people were able to complete this experiment. Now, it's important to recognize it's not that laughter made you smarter. We know that, but we also know that laughter decreases our cortisol release. That is our stress hormone. And when our cortisol lowers, we are able to access more creative, higher order thinking. And so we're able to think expansively to overcome our functional fixedness. All right, so hopefully we all somewhat believe that humor is powerful. It's a superpower, but there is a really big problem right now in our world. And that is that all of you are standing on the precipice of a humor cliff. This is data from 1.4 million people in over 166 countries that ask people the same question I just asked you at the beginning. Did you smile or laugh a lot yesterday? Now at CMC, we are in a what's water situation where it feels like laughter is everywhere. But when we go out into the world, something changes. So when you ask people this question at 16, 18, 20, the answer is consistently yes. And then right around age 23, we fall off this cliff. We stop laughing. We stop believing ourselves to be funny, especially on weekdays. I know it's really sad, right? Here, let's make it more bearable. Okay, there we go. All right, so why is this? Why do we, when we go into the workforce, stop laughing? So does anyone have a theory on why this might be? Yeah, please. Because work is boring. Yeah, it just sucks the humor out of us because work is boring. Great, okay. Yeah, what else? Lack of control. Yeah, absolutely. You can no longer go to the hub on a whim and convene a bunch of people and bring chicken wings from Collins, which I hear are amazing, like really good. I hear that's like the hottest like debate on campus. Okay, great. Yes, why else? Yes. Most people think it's not professional. Yeah, great. Okay, these are all totally right. We've done a bunch of research around this. There are 4 myths, but I actually want to talk about just one of them. And to do that, I again want you to help me. So this is one of the most important myths that I think is important to debunk when it comes to using humor out in the professional world. So to help me do this, we're going to do a really quick exercise. This is the easiest exercise you'll ever be asked to do. And it's simply, you're going to count back, you're going to get with a pair, and you're going to count back and forth 1, 2, 3 as fast as you can. So can I ask your name, sir? Adarsh. Okay, Adarsh, would you be willing to demonstrate this with me? It's so low stakes, I will mess up.
Sure.
Okay, so Adarsh, if you could stand up, I will stay 6 feet away from you. Everyone give Adarsh a round of applause. Okay, so all we're going to do is I'm going to say 1, you say 2, I say 3. You say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to count back and forth as fast as we can. The goal is to go as fast as we possibly can. And if we mess up, we'll just start again. Okay, ready? 1, 3, 2, 1, 3. Okay, 1, 3, 2. Perfect. Adarsh, thank you. That could not have been a better demonstration. All right, so you're going to do this for 30 seconds really fast with one other person. Count back and forth as fast as you can. If you mess up, just start over again. All right, perfect. That's all the time you get. Great job, great job. Okay, what happened when you messed up? Just shout it out. What happened when you messed up? Laugh, what else? Smile. What do you do with your body language when you mess up? You go like this. Adarsh and I, what I noticed about us, we both went, ugh. Okay, what else? Anyone swear? Great, yeah, we swear. We constrict. We don't like failing. And so we punish ourselves for that failure. We constrict. We protect ourselves from judgment, either our own or someone else's. We laugh because we're uncomfortable, but it's an uncomfortable laugh. It's not a laughter of connection. So we're going to re-engineer our feelings towards failure for a real quick second here. So what we're going to do is, Adarsh, if you can stand up with me again, because we are amazing at this. All right. So what we're going to do is, we're going to do 1, 2, 3 again, but this time, every time we fail, the only rule is you have to throw your hands up the air and go, ta-da! Okay? And we both have to do it. So like we're in this together. Don't leave me hanging. Okay. All right. And to make it harder, we're going to now go snap 2, 3. Okay. So 2, 3. Ready?
2,
3, 2.
3.
Ta-da! Okay, great. Perfect. That's exactly what you're going to do for 30 seconds. Ready, set, go. All right, that's all the time you get. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful. Did that one feel different? How'd that one feel different? Shout it out. You didn't get any wrong? Okay, well, that's bragging. Well done. Well done. Come after class, I'll sign 10 books for you. 10 books. Okay, great. What else? How else was that one different? It was funny. It was funny. There was more laughter. What else? Lower stakes. Totally. Lower stakes. Yeah, love it. Why? Why lower stakes?
Since both people were saying to Don, no matter what, if you were the one who failed, it didn't matter.
Yep, I love it. Okay. So there are no meaningful consequences when we mess up in this activity, right? And yet, in the first round, we're constricting, we're saying swear words, we're doing those things. Now, I want to re-engineer our belief in failure of humor. So there was, these are researchers at Harvard and Wharton, Allison Wood Brooks, Brad Bitterly, and they looked across 8 experiments at what happens when we use humor in a professional context. What are the impacts on confidence, competence, and status? And as I mentioned earlier, if you're able to use humor in a professional context, as long as it is appropriate humor, it will increase perceptions of status, confidence, and competence. But this really important secondary finding came up as well, and that is failed humor, as long as it is still appropriate, does not meaningfully influence people's perceptions of your status or competence, and it actually increases perceptions of confidence. The number one reason that people in the professional world give for why they aren't using humor at work is they're afraid of failure and they're afraid of how others will perceive them. So let's debunk that. Let's re-engineer our feelings towards failing in a professional context with humor. And of course, this if appropriate line is really, really important, and we'll touch on that in a minute. Okay, so how do we keep our sense of humor? How do we make sure we're not falling off the humor cliff? How do we find our humor? All right, so the good news here is that our lives are full of humor if we know what to look for. And the secret is not to look for what's funny, just look for what's true. And this is from hundreds of interviews with comedians, work with executives. It sounds so simple, but to have more humor in your life, don't look for what's funny, just notice what's true. So I asked all of you some tiny specific things that you love about CMC, for example. Tiny specific things you love about CMC. Here were some things that came back. Collective inner conflict on Colin's chicken. The comfy chairs in the cube, except for when the sun makes your legs sweat and stick to them. The slightly awkward and undefinable feeling when someone says, "Skonas," at the games. Great, awesome. So the reason I had you do this is I want to illustrate this idea of looking at the world in a different way, of looking at our lives and finding these little things that delight us, these little things that make us smile throughout the day. And this is not about telling jokes, it's about looking at the world in a different way. There's a psychological principle called the priming effect that says, in essence, our brains are wired to see what we've been set up to expect. So we find what we choose to look for. When we navigate our lives on the precipice of a smile, looking for reasons to be delighted rather than disappointed, we change how we interact with the world, and in turn, how it interacts back. This is the single most important thing that we teach our students in the class, is to navigate your life on the precipice of a smile. Okay, so how do you actually do this in practice? Here's a really simple tip for it. Start a humor bank. At the end of each day, write down 3 things that delighted you that day. It sounds so simple and so practical, but I promise you it works. These can be moments when you laughed with each other. These can be something about the Collins chicken. It can be whatever that thing is that made you smile or laugh that day. And what this does is it cues our brains to look at the world in a different way and then interact with the world in that way. So we're actually going to start this right now. I'm going to have you take back those phones. So take those phones back out just for like 45 seconds, and then you're going to put them back away. What I want you to do is think of a moment when you laughed with someone here on CMC's campus that you love. You laughed with someone that you love. And you can use love loosely, someone that you really liked. And I want you to text them. It doesn't have to be on CMC's campus, because I know we have some folks here who are not just CMC. So text them about that moment, a moment that you laughed together, and just say, hey, I was thinking about this moment. You can blame it on me. You can say, I'm watching this super lame ass speaker who's like making me text you this, but here's a moment that we laughed together. All right, so take 45 seconds and text that person. I'll tell you after this why we did it. All right. Great job. If you're still texting, you can finish that text. Otherwise, please put away your phones. So researchers have done these studies where they have people come into the lab. And actually in these studies, they're couples. So people who love each other, who know each other very, very well. And they ask them to reminisce about shared moments together. They have all these different conditions. They say, reminisce about moments that were negative together, reminisce about moments that were happy together, and reminisce about moments when you laughed together. And what these researchers have found is that individuals in the shared laughter condition versus the happy moments condition, so not just the negative, but shared laughter versus the happy moments, report being 23% more satisfied in their relationships after that question. So just having reminisced about moments of shared laughter makes them more happy, makes them report being more happy in their relationships. And so the way that I've put this into practice with our CMC community is we have a text thread of 10 people. And every so often, I will say, roll call moments from CMC. And I'll drop into the chat a moment. We did this earlier today. We have a text thread that's like 10 scrolls up. It's way too long. And we throw things in there like the time that we snuck into the pool and I tried to do a backflip and have a scar that will never go away because I hit the diving board. Or the time that Ben Fox cheated in Assassins and wasn't allowed into Collins for a week, or whatever those moments are. But these moments, even though they seem really minuscule in the moment, right? They're fun, but they're fleeting, are actually some of the most important capital that we have in our lives to keep our relationships strong, to keep ourselves healthy, and to feel more satisfied in our relationships. So I would encourage you to start that humor bank and also to share those moments with the people who you love. All right, so let's talk quickly about flexing your funny. And the question here is, as a leader, right, how do we shift from this mindset of navigating our lives on the precipice of smile to actually putting it into practice? So what does it look like in our leadership style? And this is different for everyone, right? You are taking leadership courses to understand that everyone's leadership style is different, and you have to figure out what path is right for you. The important thing is to recognize that it is a powerful strategy. So one example is Sarah Blakely. So Sarah Blakely is the founder and CEO of Spanx. At the time, the youngest self-made female billionaire, wildly successful today. And Sarah was one of our guests in the class. When she started out, she was super bootstrapped, and she couldn't get her product into any large department store. She made hundreds of phone calls, cold calls, emails, all that. She couldn't get anyone to respond. So she decided to try a different tactic. She mailed the head buyer of a couple different department stores a single shoe, along with a handwritten note that said, "Just trying to get my foot in the door. Do you have 5 minutes to chat? Sarah." Head buyer called her back the next day after receiving the package, and 3 months later, she was in 3 major department stores. This single act of levity proved more influential than hundreds of emails and cold calls because she thought of it. She just thought, how can I infuse some levity into this moment rather than taking the path that I have? And I recognize that it's easy to believe that if we take our lives or our mission seriously, that the presence of humor betrays that mission, that we are somehow, that gravity and levity are somehow at odds. But our research tells a different story on this. One of our guests was Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. And when she visited our class, she told us about a time that the Russian government had bugged the US State Department, obviously a serious breach in international diplomacy. Secretary Albright had her next meeting with the Russian foreign minister a few days later, and so she was thinking about, okay, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead into it? How do I even let him know that we know this? So she thought about it, and when she arrived to the meeting with the Russian foreign minister, she walked into the room wearing an enormous bug pin. Now, that is a woman that knows that you have bugged the State Department. She wore an enormous bug pin, and she talked about how this moment, she walked into the room, her counterpart looked at her, looked at the bug pin, and she said he just couldn't help but smile. It shifted the energy in the room, and it allowed us to have a more productive conversation. And she has incredible stories of doing this. And so this story illuminates at least two things that are true. One, humor is a choice. It is one we can make in tiny moments. It's one we can make in big moments, when times are light and also when times are serious. And second, the balance of gravity and levity gives power to both. We can do serious things without taking ourselves too seriously. And then third, Secretary Albright is a fierce fashion queen. I mean, there's a whole book about her pins. She's fantastic. All right. So I want to talk quickly about fueling your funny or fueling your humor, because in between these big moments are the really small ones. And so the question is, how do we keep the pilot light on, right? We can start our humor bank, but once we all go out to work and everyone around us is falling off the humor cliff, what do we do? And what's important to recognize here is it's about humor, but more importantly, it's about being human. And we have lost so much of our humanity in business. I also teach a class called A New Type of Leader. And the thesis of that class is, it used to be that leaders needed to be revered, that they needed to do all the right things, say all the right things, be perfect. And now leaders need to be understood. We need to have vulnerability. We need to be real people. In fact, a recent survey asked, actually two interesting surveys here. One, a recent HBR survey asked people, would you rather trust your boss or a stranger? Your boss or a stranger? 58% of people said they'd rather trust a stranger than their boss. Now, you will all be the 42%, right? How do we become the 42%? So another survey asked people, what traits inspire trust in a leader? And two of the top responses were, one, I know what obstacles my leader overcame to be successful. So some self-deprecation, a little bit of openness about what they did wrong. And two, my leader speaks like a regular person. Again, the bar is so low out there, everyone. It's just, we're walking out and we're gonna thrive. Speaks like a regular person. So, when work gets serious, when life gets busy, it can be really easy to be transactional. And what we find in our courses is that these small shifts in tiny moments can change a moment from transactional to human and authentic. As small as, and this one's gonna be very practical, how we sign off our emails. So this is something you're all gonna change right now. Shout out, how do you sign off your emails? Best, thanks, regards. Kind regards. Ooh, kind regards, love it. I was on a thread the other day with a client, and two clients actually. One wrote a long email and then wrote regards, and then the other one wrote an email that was short and then wrote best regards. And I was like, what were the first regards? Were those like not your best? Who's getting your best regards? Like, does this person just save their best regards? Anyways, the point is, best is the worst. Thanks, regards, kind regards. This is such an incredible opportunity to infuse some levity into how we communicate, because the more technology mediated our communication becomes, the easier it is to lose our humanity. So this is what I would like you all to do for the next week. So practical, but do not sign a single email off with something generic. Sign it off with what I call a callback. It's actually what comedians call a callback. So who knows what a callback is? You just...
When you call back to something that was funny earlier.
Love you, yes. So all you do is you just reference something that was said earlier. So you could sign off an email to me with pet frogs, or Colin's chicken, or if you're late to reply, sheepishly, or if you are studying for finals and haven't slept, yours heavily caffeinated. Anything will work, but just change your email sign-off. And the magical thing that happens is that this is a butterfly effect in your life, and especially in your professional life. So it will change the way that people respond to you. They'll react to just that thing first before they get to the business of it. So this is my very tactical tip that weirdly my students 5 years later write back and they're like, I think not signing off with best changed my life. And I'm like, well, we taught you a lot of things. That's kind of not impressive. Okay. All right. So I also want to mention that there are people in this community who are doing this. So many of you, probably all of you are doing this, but I wanted to give throw up on screen a couple of shout outs that we got for people who are in really small moments creating levity and infusing it. So this is not all of the responses we got, but take a quick look and let's give a round of applause for these folks who have been shouted out for having humor. All right. Two quick things I want to mention, and then I'd love to ask for some questions, and then I have 2 minutes of closing thoughts for you as well. The first is humor is really tricky these days, right? Humor can be pretty tough, and we're not professional comedians. We're out there trying to have levity in our lives, but we don't quite know how. So what are some tips to practice safe sets when we are being funny? All right, so number one, recognize, and most importantly, it's not about you. Don't ask yourself, will this make me look funny? Ask yourself, how will this make other people feel? And this will cut out 90% of the things that you're really proud to say because you love them, but they're not quite right for the situation. This also means never punching down. So punching down is making fun of someone of lower status. And you also want to check your distance. So how close are you personally to what you're making light of? I can make fun of my mother, but probably not your mother, who is probably lovely. I would never make fun of her. I heard she's lovely. Right, but the distance is too large. So it's not something that I can make fun of. All right. So I want to pause there. I want to leave some room for questions. But my hope today, my deep, deep hope, is that you change the narrative completely around that humor graph. That in 10 years, we're no longer teaching a class at Stanford about the power of humor because it's baked in. The what's water of CMC is transferred to the what's water of our corporate world. So I hope you'll make these small changes, look for what's true, choose to live your life on the precipice of a smile, and I promise that when you do, you will create teams and communities and families where it just feels like joy comes more easily. And if that doesn't sell you on the power of humor, I will throw in my pet frog. All right, so let's I would love to hear what came up for you, what's on your mind, what questions you have. So anyone who has something on their mind they'd like to share.
Thank you so much. We really, really enjoyed your presentation. And everyone, just as mentioned, you are welcome to start asking questions. We will have 2 microphones up here that you are able to go ahead and walk up to and line up to. We recommend that just 3 to 4 people line up in each line, but feel free to go ahead and begin.
Hi, Naomi. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, Sophie.
Really enjoyed hearing your talk. I know that you mentioned the humor cliff that you fall off of at age 23. And I know that, like many students here, you went into consulting post-grad. If you could go back and give yourself, as a 23-year-old in that consulting job, advice about finding humor and kind of general life and how to make it more spicy and fun, what would you tell yourself?
Your joy is your greatest asset. In life and at work, your joy is your greatest asset. Looking back, it was the moments that I had humor. It was the moments when I felt like I was being fully myself, that I was also getting the most recognition, that I was connecting in meaningful ways with colleagues. And I think that I had this misperception. I would be one person at CMC, and I was so comfortable being myself at CMC. Like, I told my mom that, right? I was like, and yet I would go to these career fairs, and I would like borrow a skirt from my roommate because I didn't have nice stuff, and I would like borrow this from someone else, and I would walk in there, and I would be like a Naomi bot. And I thought that I needed to put on this facade to be successful because I saw other people doing that. And the truth is, the more senior people at the organization are acting that way because they have lost touch with it. It's harder to access joy. And I work with so many executives, and literally the coaching I do is they're saying, how do I access joy in my life? Help me access joy. So that is your greatest asset. I wish I knew that, and I didn't have to go through this whole journey to re-find it. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Harrison. I'm a super senior at CMC. Yeah.
Wow, super senior.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That sounds super.
Yeah, it's a great time. My question is there ever a time not to use humor?
No, never. No, I'm joking. Definitely. Humor is so context dependent. And I tell students, what is your goal? Get in touch with what's your goal in using humor. And I apologize, I visited a class early and I told this story, but there was an executive that I work with, Thomas, and Thomas runs a large media company. He founded this media company. It's now quite large and successful. Thomas had to let go someone on his executive team. And this woman had grown up with the organization. Everyone else on the executive team knew and loved her. And after 6 months of performance improvement and getting feedback from other employees that she was really detrimental to the culture, he decided that it was time to let her go. This was a hard decision, but at least everyone was aligned, right? The executive team was aligned on this. So Thomas walked into the first meeting when Jane wasn't there because she had been let go, and Jane normally led these meetings. So he walked into the meeting, he noticed that he was feeling really nervous, he wanted to cut the tension, diffuse tension, powerful, right? And he said, hey everyone, thanks for coming. Jane, take it away. And there was silence. And after about 5 seconds of silence, someone in the room said, I don't think that was very funny. And to his credit, Thomas said, you are absolutely right. I am so sorry. That was coming from my own insecurity that I had to make this decision, and I'm worried it wasn't right. And he said, can I please start over? She said, yep. He walked out of the room, physically walked out of the room. He walked back in and he said, hey, first I want to talk about Jane's departure, and I want to create a safe space and open it up for us to have a conversation about it, for you to ask me anything you want, right? So that's a great moment where that is probably not the moment for humor, for that specific joke, right? If he had made the joke about the air conditioning or about the commute or whatever, that would have been fine because it's tangential. But making a joke about her departure was not right in that moment. And so what we tell our students is remove the truth or remove the humor. Would you still say that truth without the humor? And if the truth is Jane's departed, is that really a thing that we want to joke about? So yes, not every situation is right for humor.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi. Excuse me. My name is Robin.
Hey, Robin.
I would just thank you for your talk because I had a pretty tough day, and this was really nice to hear.
Yeah. I'm
Sorry.
so sorry to hear that.
Okay. This is embarrassing, but it's fine. So I had a question about using humor to like an elite situation, like when you're in a group of people that have more money than you, or like, oh my God, I'm sorry, this is so embarrassing.
No, you got this.
No, I'm good. When you're using humor in like a situation where you know people are in like a higher stature than you, like, what is your technique for like going about that? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Thank you for your vulnerability. I feel very inspired by you right now to share something vulnerable in return about when a moment when I needed levity in my life and it felt powerful. And then I promise I'll answer your question about status. Part of the reason why I really believe in this work is I think that especially when we are in places that are hard or dark or feel really gnarled, that's the time when we need levity. And it's not the time when it feels the easiest to access joy. And so I remember growing up, and this is sort of what made me feel called to this work as well, is this memory. I was 5 years old, and my dad was really sick. And I remember it was such a heavy time for our family. And it just felt like nothing we could do could have any joy. And it was right around Christmas. And we didn't have a Christmas tree that year because we normally kept the Christmas tree downstairs, and my dad was in a bed upstairs with an IV pole. I should mention my dad is healthy now and is fine. Thank you. But it was a very hard time, and we didn't have a Christmas tree, like I mentioned, and that was fine. We had like bigger fish to fry as a family at that moment. So on Christmas morning, my sister and I always slept in the same bed on Christmas Eve. By the way, we're Jewish, but my dad is Buddhist, but we celebrate, it's not important. So on Christmas morning, we walk out into the living room to find that my mom and dad had decorated his IV pole like a Christmas tree, and my dad was wearing like the Christmas skirt around his body, and there were presents just like all over the ground and all over him, and we all just burst out crying and laughing. And it was this moment that was a turning point for my family. It was just like, okay, we can do this. We've got this. And, you know, this thing about balancing gravity and levity, it's so, it feels so trite to say, but the ways that this work has had the greatest impact on my students and on my clients are moments like my student whose dad is going through Parkinson's. And he said, you know what, I'm gonna make a shared list with my dad of these, we're gonna make a shared humor bank, and we're gonna create moments together. How many moments of levity can we create over the next 5 years? So I want to thank you for your vulnerability, and I want to say this is totally why this work is so important and why we can't lose our joy. So thank you. You also asked a ridiculously smart question about humor and status because it's so important. Okay, so humor and status, this is like, we could teach a master class on just humor and status. In the dinner conversation before this, someone asked about self-deprecation. Self-deprecation and status are so tied together. As you rise in status in an organization, it turns out that humor becomes even more powerful, that people perceive it as you're confident, you're powerful, you don't take yourself too seriously, you can take a joke. When you're lower in status and you use humor that's about your core area of competence, people will perceive it as genuine insecurity. And so as junior people in an organization, you want to be very careful not to self-deprecate about your core competence. So if I'm a consultant, I don't want to joke about my critical thinking, my PowerPoint monkeying, my other things that are core competencies for a consultant. But I can joke about things like how terrible of a cook I am. My partner Nick can attest to this. Or how bad of a driver I am, or whatever those other things that are okay to self-deprecate about. Yeah, thanks for asking about status. It's a super important part of this work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thanks for making me feel more comfortable.
Cool.
With the most embarrassing moment of my life, so.
Okay.
Hi. I wanted to thank you for asking that question because I'm sure that wasn't very easy. but my name is Zarina, and I was wondering, how do you think your life would be different if Bonnie had gotten your Friday night right, or I guess gotten your cat's name right, maybe?
That's a great life. It just wasn't mine. Nothing wrong with staying home on Friday nights, watching History Channel documentaries, re-ironing your blouses. Like, for someone, that's the right life. For me, that was such an incongruent life from my authentic self. And so that was the problem. But I think that'd be a beautiful life if I wanted it.
Right.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I probably have a dog named Dog by now. I don't know.
Howdy, I'm Tim, and I wanted to ask about how you think we can use humor to sort of address maybe diversity and cultural background differences, because I know that's something that's very emerging in a lot of places. It's like you have people with different backgrounds, and crossing that sort of cultural barrier is tricky.
Yeah, it's such a great point. We have a whole day in class focused on culture. The one-liner that I'll tell you is, jokes are not universal. Levity is universal. Laughter is a fundamental melody of human conversation in every language. You laugh around someone, babies laugh, people laugh, right? So when you're thinking about humor across cultures, think instead about levity. So think about what are these small moments of these small smiles that we can create, and then really tactically, when we have people who work across cultures, especially leaders, we always have them pull out humor from the culture that they're working in. So for example, I work with a senior manager whose team is based in Singapore. So for her, instead of using humor in presentations to her team, she will reach out to her team and say, hey, what do you all find funny? What clips do you find funny? Tell me about the humor there, and then she'll incorporate that into her presentations. So really having empathy around it, and also recognizing that humor styles are different across cultures. So the magnet, the sniper, the stand-up, and the sweetheart, we have a higher distribution, for example, of magnets in American organizations. We have a higher distribution of stand-ups in our Latinx organizations, a higher so anyways, so understanding sort of what is the cultural context that you're using humor in, and trying to adapt to that rather than bring your own style.
Cool beans, thank you.
Cool beans, thanks.
Thank you so much,
Cool
Naomi.
beans is also universal.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Naomi, for your wonderful presentation. On behalf of all of us, it was very transformative and exciting to be embracing humor in this way. So big round of applause for Naomi.
Thank
we
you.
really are so happy. We're so grateful to have you back at CMC for this. So everyone, thank you so much for your wonderful questions. We of course had more, but have limited time. So there is a book signing that will be taking place outside. So if you have a book that you would like to get signed or would like to buy a book, feel free to go out into that lobby, and you may also exit out in that lobby. Thank you so much, everyone.